I just want to welcome you all for coming. Thank you so much for this, quite a few of you who've stuck with us all 4 times, so that's awesome. Just for the recording's sake, I'm going to go ahead and go through the formalities of the introduction. My name is Heather Ottone. I'm the curator of Native American, the James T. Bylett Curator of Native American and Non-Western Art here at the Fred Jones Jr. Museum of Art. And I'm very happy that we're able to do the 4th of our 4 Skype chats with the artists related to the Enter the Matrix exhibition. I am going to ask you, if you haven't already, to please silence your phones. Because we're recording today's events, if you'll please, if you have to take a phone call, and sometimes that happens, if you'll please step out and away from the door so that your conversation doesn't become part of our recording. I would also like to thank the people here at the museum who have helped to make this event happen. That includes, is that better? Is that better? Yeah. I would like to thank Karen Bowles in our education department, who's helped us to process the paperwork and keep our schedule on task. I'd also like to thank Jessica Farling, who's actually, this was, I think, partially her idea, and we're very grateful for that, and she's working the booth today. And I also want to acknowledge and thank our museum director, Mark White, who has provided the support for this exhibition and for the programming related to Enter the Matrix. I'd like to go ahead and introduce Nick Tupara. He is from New Zealand. He's Maori. He was born in 1961. It's my honor to introduce him today because I have a lot of respect for Nick. He comes with very high recommendations from my friends Sandy Adset and June Grant. Nick Tupara received formal training at Toi Hukura, the School of Maori Visual Art and Design in Gisborne, New Zealand. He has been working as a professional artist for over 25 years as a traditional Maori kaita moko, colloquially referred to as a tattoo artist. However, he also works in other traditional cultural forms, including carving and performing. Several years ago, he adopted printmaking as a medium and has adapted his use of tamoko line and Maori design into his monotypes. As a respected member of his Maori community, Tupara seeks opportunities to support the perpetuation of his Maori culture through the expressive arts and as an arts administrator. It's been my pleasure to learn more about Nick's work as an artist and his efforts for cultural preservation. I'm sorry I'm getting choked up because that part has been very significant to me. He, like many Indigenous artists, his work engages more than the act of being creative because he also extends excessive efforts to retain traditional knowledge and to protect sacred places for his community. Please welcome Nick Tupara. They're all clapping for you, Nick. So,
thank you.
Would you like to say a few comments, or shall we begin our conversation?
Just very briefly, I think just to say thank you for the opportunity and to the university. Ka nui te mihi ki a koutou katoa kua tai mai ki te whakarongo ki taku nei kōrero. Thank you all for coming to have a little listen to what we have to say today. And yeah, it's a terrific opportunity. It's a very rare opportunity to have an opportunity to take the time to talk as an Indigenous artist. Material has to sit in the mainstream, and as such we often lose an opportunity to talk culturally with each other. So many thanks for that.
Well, so thank you, Nick. Thank you. And I just really appreciate that. So you guys, this is already tomorrow morning in New Zealand, and so we had to drag him out of bed. No, I'm just kidding. A little bit. Make sure he was fully caffeinated for this morning. So one of the conversation pieces that I thought we could get started with is if maybe you could describe for the students how you got introduced to printmaking and why you've continued to work in that medium.
Yeah, well, I went to, you said that I had trained at Toi Hukura School of Art. I actually was a tutor there some years ago and been a student. But I did do painting with Sandy at Toi Mairangi School, which is another institution. And it was during that time that I basically painted. And the first few images in my handout are of my painting and painting style that I developed there. But I came into art as a carver, and that was what I had hoped to do with Sandy, but because Sandy's a painter, he said, no, you have to paint. And then during that time, Melanie Yazi came to visit, and she joined forces with a Māori printmaker called Gabriel Bowles, and they were running a workshop, which I wasn't invited to. But two friends of mine were, and so I hitched a ride with them. Thoroughly enjoyed the workshop, and some of the images that followed after the image of with Melanie is stuff that I did during that workshop, and that kind of got me rolling. Got to say, I haven't looked back since. I enjoy printmaking. I don't have much of a setup here in my hometown of Gisborne, but that's okay because Melanie showed me all sorts of tricks where you don't have to have great big presses and all the best inks and stuff, but you can still produce a reasonable offering. And printmaking is probably, I'm going to say, I've been, as an artist, been somewhat more successful as a printmaker than a painter. But I think my painting style and approach has been, but it's a good way to tell stories. Stories of my people anyway.
I want to make sure that we've prepared some handouts. Has everybody gotten a handout? Can we pass those around? Thank you, Ashley, for moving those around. Nick is making references to the images that he sent, and those are represented in the handout. And so we'll just take a moment and just let them pass those around. Haven't been this disorganized. There's something about today that has not been smooth.
It's me.
It's not you. It's not you. It's been all day long. It's raining here. I think whenever it rains here, we're always so grateful that we can't think of anything else.
Well, you are handing them out. The first three images are images of my paintings. By way of background, they're discussions I have with the main task form in those paintings. It represents the moon. So it's a cultural connection to our traditional connection to the cosmos, I guess, in that respect. But it does play a lot on nature and our cultural interaction with the environment and creatures.
I think they've made their way around, and everybody's taking a look at the images. So you raised it up that it's in your painting. It's clearly in all of your art. So our students, for the most part, are not going to be familiar with sort of, we've provided readings, but if I know these students, they are like the students that I taught. They may not have read them. So could you help us to know about maybe a little, is there some way to explain it that would be as, for somebody like myself, rather simple-minded, maybe just a way of maybe explaining a little bit about Maori images, the images that express your Maori identity, and maybe just talk about that a little bit to help people, because there's relationships to our Native American communities, but I think because it's in your images, it would be hard for them to maybe read your images without just a little bit of background about the Maori culture.
Well, on the first image there, unfortunately, it's got me standing in front of it. With the image of the moon, and I use the moon a lot, but our traditional name for the moon is marama. And if you pronounce it marama, marama is also our word for understanding. And so I use the moon to represent a greater sense of cultural understanding. And in that particular blue image there, the butterfly that's in there, it's actually a very, very small butterfly, but I've blown it up. It's probably, how would you say, it's probably an inch square. It's a very tiny thing. It is a very vivid blue, and our traditional name for it is kikorangi. And kikorangi is the name, one of our traditional names for the sky. And it seemed to me that it's something so huge, also shares the same, shares a name with something so small. And the painting is about never kind of allowing yourself to be categorized one way or another, but also always to have some sort of ambition and direction, and picking up on the wisdom of our elders past about creating a sense of aspiration and trying to push that aspiration, and in my case, artistically, forward for yourself and find understanding, which is why the moon image is so strong. And even in the second image with the jellyfish, again, the moon is represented again by a mouth. And a jellyfish is something that relies on the movements of the tides, and the tides are driven by the moon. And it's about just accepting that there are some things greater than yourself that are worthy of some attention and worthy of some guidance. And with the movement of the tide, the jellyfish moves. You'll notice a little feather in there. I always put feathers in my work. It's feather for my people is about significance. You know, that it's an important discussion. It's but it's something that need not be a burdensome thing. It's light. It's and it's always there to utilise it to help yourself, and not use it as something that's sort of too significant or too important and too distant from yourself. But it's all inclusive. Then the next two images I wanted to bring in because they bring in a lozenge, a long lozenge shape based on our traditional canoe, our traditional ocean and water vessels. We call them waka. And again, we've got a moon image, we've got a feather image, but we're looking at the waka as a means of connecting ourselves present to our culture of the past and building a bridge there. And I use waka a lot in my imagery to make a connection back to ancestors. It's thought that when you die, your spirit ascends to a canoe and is transported back to our ancestral homeland, which is somewhere in the Pacific somewhere. People have tried to guess where it is. We call it Hawaii. And it's where everybody ends up. It's believed that's where our people travelled from to come to New Zealand. And we believe all of the Pacific was settled from that one Pacific island. And so that's roughly some of our cultural things.
I'm interested in that painting that you have of the, am I reading it correctly? It's like looking up underneath from the water, up into the bottom of the canoe. You have in the painting, but it also is sort of like, it serves a little bit also like a horizon line across those three panels.
Yeah, I think I always try to use a high degree of contrast in my compositions. Dark and light are an important cultural element. In our tradition, the world was dark, and then by actions of the ancestors, light was allowed to come in, and with that, the light coming in, they call it te ao marama, or the world of understanding, and again using the word marama, which is also a word for the moon, and so the moon is central to that. The canoe feature allows, again, for that ancestral connection, but in that there's a hint at a separation between then and now, but the traditions are locked together into creating one craft, the silhouette of one craft.
Beautiful. That's really beautiful. Thank you for explaining that. I don't know that I would have understood all of that. And in the image that after you sent us carrying, and that's the one that's in the exhibition. Did you know that? I told you that before, didn't I?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I wonder if you'd like to speak to that just a little bit.
Well, that was a piece of Melanie's work, and we got given that as homework. So a number of us got a piece each, and that was the piece that I got, and I didn't even know what to do or where to start, frankly. And I felt really quite awkward about touching her work and putting stuff all over it. And it seemed so random in terms of shapes and colour and textures and things. And I just picked a shape, and the yellow shape reminded me of one of our birds. It's called a pūkeko. A pūkeko is a bird associated with our goddess for fire, Mahuika. And so the figure behind the bird kind of reminded me of her as well. And so I put detailed facial features and facial traditional tattoo designs on her. And next to that, just from her breath, we call that ha, and the little figure that's in the pinkish red colour is her breath, her sharing her understanding and knowledge, her imparting wisdom. And the bird there has a little, next to its feet, a little egg, and the egg kind of sits beneath the bird but also within her. And again, fire being used to not cook the egg, but fire is there to help care for things, to things warm, to process food, to show the way, to gather around. And yeah, that was some of my connections that I put together there. And the feather, again, just another bit of imagery that I try to find a space for. I wish I could read the text, but I can't, and I can't recall what it says. Oh, yeah. Waka ngaro te tangata toi tū te whenua is an old people come and go, people live and die, but the land will always remain. Mm-hmm. It's an old saying back from within my culture about while you are here is to ensure that you're caring for that land so that it does remain for the ones that will follow. Mm. And it's again to the care of the egg and the passing on of knowledge. If that helps.
So, you know, you were saying something to Marwin just before when I had to take a quick phone call, and then I came back, and you were explaining to Marwin that you hadn't really intended to take up printmaking, and yet it seems like it really suits you, and it suits your images. And maybe you could provide for the students, like maybe a summary of that, if you didn't mind sharing that. Just.
Yeah, no, well, I think working with Melanie and Marwin, and even Gabriel Bells, I think I had a mispreconception of what printmaking was all about, and which is somewhat unfortunate. But it is you can be quite free with the art form. You can make things like monoprints. It's not like there is a printmaking fashion where you duplicate many copies of the same and things. But also printmaking allows you to make monoprints and bring in different kinds of shapes and textures and colours and all sorts of artistic weapons to create an offering. And I found that quite exciting in the workshop with Melanie, and discussions I had with Arwen when he came across to New Zealand last. I felt a little bit out of sorts with the rest of the printmakers, because they seem to be working along the kind of lines that I all printmaking should be working along. And, but working with Marwin, he was suggesting to me, you know, there is that school, and then there's all this other stuff. And I think I'm all about the other stuff at the moment anyway. I think one day I'd like to hope that I'll hone my skill to be more technically apt to cover that other side. But in the meantime, I'm just really enjoying just making stuff happen. And so I don't have a printing press here at my studio. But Melanie showed us a tech. You can just use a spoon and transfer the ink. You can just use rollers, or you can, you know, transfer it by whatever way. And when you do that, you're not too sure what kind of inking you're going to get. You know, stuff just turns out the way it turns out, and I really like that at the moment.
So how do the images of your painting, your print, relate to? Are you still painting?
I do do some paintings. I think the storytelling though for printing and painting has stayed the same. I'm really printing has sort of ruined me a bit with painting. Every time I pick up a paintbrush, I end up painting the same painting I just finished. I haven't been able to extend myself painting wise. So I find it very frustrating. Whereas with printmaking, everything's pretty new. I think the shot that I've got of the work I sent through for the exhibition, the one after, that was the first print. That was the print I made with Melanie at the workshop. And I think I'm trying to be like my painting in that particular piece. It's a terrible photo because it was behind glass in a frame. But again, I'm looking to use the moon, the clouds, the feathers, and trying to just make an image in ink. Again, it's a monoprint, and we're not trying to make a series of things, but just try to manipulate the ink and using all sorts of little tricks Melanie showed us to try to come up with an offering. But the painting stuff, I can't say I'm enjoying it much, but people tend to want them, so we've got to keep them going. But I'm looking for some means to make a change, make a switch. And at the moment, printmaking's giving me that opportunity.
Why do you think printmaking is working for you right now and painting isn't?
I think the way I'm printmaking, I think it's a lack of control, if that makes sense. When you ink up a piece of lino and you press it by hand onto a paper, you're not too sure how it's going to turn, and you have to kind of accept what you get and see if you can work that through further. And some of my other images, like the next one, with the fish in the circle with the moon again, the backgrounds for that was sort of like, it's a little bit of hit and miss. You like to pretend that you're in control, and with printmaking, for me anyway, more often than not, I'm not completely. And I enjoyed that. I enjoy the tones and the textures that I might get from the ink. I like to think or pretend that I know what's going to come, but it kind of just happens. It's sort of a magic there. And both those images, excuse the photos again, because they're framed. Yeah, the colours and the texture, the tones in there was happened. And I enjoyed making quite a large number of those, and every one tended to be quite successful.
I found when I was doing prints that there was something about the sort of giving oneself over to just accepting what comes out. You put everything into it that you can to control it, and then you give it up when you put it through the pressing process. That there was a certain amount of synergy that seemed to feed, and because it was, for me, I found it faster than painting, that I was able to complete a project faster than a painting, that it was something that responded to a cohesive idea, whereas something with painting I found was that it took longer to evolve the image, and sometimes my idea may shift from the beginning to the end, and so by the time I got to the end, I was done with it. It didn't feel like it had that same synergy of just sort of creative expression. And I wonder if that resonates for you at all in what you're describing.
Yeah, I think it does to quite a large degree. Every time I do a hand print, they are all different, and so once you get your image back, you have to respond to it differently. And over time, I've developed different ways of responding, and I really enjoyed that with painting. I'm a fairly fast painter, so I in the end just try to push them out. What you'll sort of confined a bit by the canvas. Once you put the paint on, it's on there and it's within that. With printmaking, the way I'm doing it, you might take your image, you might get a rag and rub it out, or texture it, or cut the image out and put it onto something else. Add other mediums to it, and depending on just the way you want to respond to the printed image that you've got. And I find that element really interesting. I think coming from a background of carving to the process of actually carving I tend to lose linoleum a lot. I enjoy that part as well. I enjoy the three-dimensional nature of the carving. Even the look of the templates, I quite enjoy way that looks, what way that turns out as a piece of art in itself. And the collaboration I'm doing with Jacob Enders is I actually want to keep the templates and display them as a piece of artwork in itself after we've printed them. So, and that kind of excites me as well. Whereas a canvas, it's paint on the canvas, and that's about it. If you keep applying paint until you've done. And, for me, there's not enough intrigue in that at the moment. I like it.
I imagine it will come back on its own.
Sure.
So you were, I want to get to thinking about you sent some images of so I'm not exactly sure how I'm reading this, but there's some images of some white surfaces. And I don't know if that is the prepared matrix surface or if that is a collograph of a board shape or the canoe shape.
Yeah.
And then you have them printed with colors. Maybe you could help us read what you were doing with that and maybe just talk about that briefly.
Yeah, well, partly that was Marlon's fault. When he came across and he started printing images and then cutting them out and then replacing them into a composition. And when I saw that, I went away again, and I think the carver and the 3D sort of interest in me sort of started to happen. And so I started to emboss using a lino print, and the white on white images are embossed images. I kind of got a bit questioned about whether or not that was even printmaking because there wasn't any ink. But I was just creating impressions and then quite interested in just the way the three-dimensional nature worked its magic with different lights. And then because of the complaining about the ink, I actually took some tattoo ink and created a printing ink myself to use on the other waka forms. So there's some green and some red or sort of brown tone. And those are tattooing inks, and it leaves quite a sheen. It's very, quite a bit difficult to manipulate. Like, it doesn't roll as smoothly as proper ink and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I just happened to not like the stuff that was coming out of the ink tube. So I started adding tattoo inks to it to change the tones. And again, I had no idea how that was going to turn out in the image. And so I got what I got and just had a play with it, had made up a few variations, and I took those particular images to an event we call the Māori Art Market, and just to see, this was my eureka moment, to see how the critics would take it, and whether or not I could be a printmaker, to be frank. And so I took these images. The Māori Art Market is the biggest gathering of Māori artists in New Zealand, and I thought, well, I'll hang a few of them and see what they say. And I did okay. So I didn't bring any of them home. So I thought, right, I'm going to call myself a printmaker now. and just keep going. And I'm still exploring with things, enjoying it.
So you said you didn't bring any of them home. So it wasn't just Maori people that were collecting at this market. I expect that there were other people who were collecting your work as collectors of Maori art who may not be Maori. And so you were concerned or interested in the response that you would get to working a slightly different variation of the surface and using the inks the way you did. And then you've got a couple here later on in the packet where you have an embossment or a collograph, and then you have the same form with it looks like maybe clouds worked into that one side that is not carved.
Yeah.
And tell me what people thought about that and what you were thinking about it, and then tell me what people thought about it.
That was the same piece of lino, and I did ink some of it and embossed some of it, or collographed it. That's my new word for the day. And then add a little bit of a play. Wasn't really sure where I was going. I left to go and have some lunch and came back, and somebody walked in and bought them. I did two of them, and again, it was that sort of a little bit of indication that maybe I did have an offering to make in printmaking. So I'm using the same lino template. I find with the embossing, it tends to wreck the template. So maybe I need to change my materials there because of the pressure is so much greater. But yeah, I was able to try something the same, but maybe just a little bit different. And the clouds in that are me manipulating the ink on the template just to break up the solid colour. And the ink on there, if I recall, was quite thickly applied, and but it gave me lots to work with, and you can see a progression from my paintings as well. But yeah, so we tried that. I haven't done one of those since. I managed to walk out the door, and I haven't gone back to that as yet. Carried on with the 3D ones, and you'll see in the package the butterfly ones a bit. Well, butterfly, they're moths actually.
Is that last two photographs? Is that of the wall behind you?
Yeah, that's the one I'm working on. The one on the wall. They're not actually stuck down. They're just free at the moment, so I can have a little play. But so I can play with the composition. But largely it's actually a moth that's involved with our death ceremonies. There's a period when the remains of the deceased are left, and the apuriri moth comes and consumes the flesh, and the bones are collected up for burial. But and I've arranged the moth to in rows at the bottom, and that pattern we call that roi matataroa, or the albatross tears. So the moth have arranged them in a mourning pattern from our tradition, and then the moths above is once mourning and has to being completed, then the the spirit enters the canoe motif and then goes off, and the random layout of the moths after that is just the freeing of that spirit. So I'm trying to take some of that storytelling into printmaking by actually making the canoes and having the moths as a three-dimensional element. And again, all of those are printed with just random as, whatever tone or colour we get. Just see if we can pick up this bits and work. The red moth just indicates the sacredness of the activity, the tradition.
Thank you. That's beautiful, and it's beautiful to see it behind you. So that's.
Well, I'm going to put something interesting in the back.
Something. Of course, we always want to give the students a few moments. Does anybody have any questions right away about this or any of the things that you guys have seen him speak about? They're a quiet bunch. You know that I see on the bottom of tell me the word again for the canoe.
Waka.
Waka. That there's a ridges that are in the center. Like, is that like a functional thing within the like to hold the oars or something, or is it just a design feature of yours? Does it have any significance?
Yeah, it's each notch represents a genealogy. So each notch represents a generation. And quite often put them into as a reminder that this is not my story, but belongs to many, many generations that have gone before me. It's used a lot on a practical sense for tools. And there's many suggestions of the uses. Some of it is as grip, so you'll have it on the edge of maybe a stone tool implement. You'll also get them in carvings again for the whole genealogical sort of storytelling part of it. I don't know why, I've always thought they're a neat way just to break the line too from a design perspective and add a little interest to a silhouette. So I use them a lot for that. But they are part of the story. They are part of the connection ancestrally back, generation to generation.
Thoughts? They're so eager to go back to the studio and paint, I'm sure. Yes, sir. That the right ones? There's a question if you would consider, if you would explain the images that you have on that page.
Well, those are the ones I did with Marwin. Well, not with Marwin, but at the same artistic gathering up north last year. That was in the northern part of our country, and I'm from the eastern part. And so when I was travelling up, I was wondering what I could do up there. The tribes up there and my people haven't really gotten on in the past. So I was trying to find some common ground. And at the moment, for them and for my area, mining, ocean oil mining is becoming a huge issue for our people in terms of the care of the environment. And so I decided I'd do some prints based on mining, believe it or not. The figure represents phosphorescence in the water. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but there are sea creatures that emit light when they're agitated. And if you're ever out fishing and you're paddling your boat to go fishing, lights will light up each time the paddle hits the water, and our people call that henatore, and the phosphorescence is the light that's in the ocean. And so I was using that as a theme to create, in this case, a female form who is the phosphorescence in the water, and she's agitating it to have a discussion about the rights and the wrongs of drilling for oil in the ocean. And because I knew that they had, the tribal peoples up north were having huge issues with that, I thought I'd take that as a theme. Again, I tried to bring my own self in there as well. And again, all the clouds and the water and thing was me manipulating the ink on the template. The circles, the small circles on there was actually me drilling holes with a drill into the template, which kind of surprised a few of the other printmakers. But I think that's the wood carver coming out of me. So both of those images are about discussion the ocean wants to have with us. About what we think we're wanting to do to the oil drilling. Again, I've just included the moon again. Try to get texture by manipulating the ink. All going with my waka silhouette and the little cut out triangles and things like that as well. Hope that helps.
Any other questions? I think we've had as much as we should be taking of your time, and I so appreciate your time and cooperation this morning, and all the work you did to help bring us these images, and helping us to make sure that we figured out what time it needed to be for you to get you on our schedule, which was a challenge for us. We're pretty, not too many of us have that international traveling experience to figure it out, so that was awesome. So I just want to thank you, and if you guys would join me in thanking Nick for his time today.